Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Tiffany, retired librarian turned homeschool mom. And in this video, we're going to look at a film called Something the Lord Made. This film chronicles the life and relationship of Vivien Thomas, an African-American, eventually lab assistant, and the man he worked for, Alfred Blalock. They start out at Vanderbilt University, where Thomas was originally employed as a janitor. You do also see that he was a brilliant woodworker, which is kind of important. He's very, very good with his hands and very good at innovation. He ends up becoming a medical assistant to Blalock, and they work on trying to discover how to prevent people from dying of shock, which was stop researching the blood, give it to them. So then Blalock accepts a position at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. And Thomas goes with him. And there was a lot of issues with this. Thomas and his family particularly were treated very, very badly, particularly compared to his work in Vanderbilt in Nashville. So he has money problems. He's not paid well. He's treated badly. He's given stares because there's not really any African Americans working as anything but janitors at Johns Hopkins at the time. On top of that, Blalock acknowledges that he needs Thomas, but he's also still very, very racist and doesn't acknowledge him as an equal at all. So they have a really messy relationship, and they work together along with another female doctor, Helen Tusag. She's a pediatric cardiologist in a time where you don't do open heart surgery. And that's what they worked on. They worked on blue baby syndrome, where you have children, essentially their blood isn't able to be oxygenated, at least not efficiently. And Thomas himself, not Blalock, adapts surgical tools they use on when they're experimenting on dogs, and essentially creates and performs the surgery that is now called the Blalock-Thomas Tusag shunting procedure. And when they first do this, they do it on an 18-month-old little baby girl. And Blalock insists that Thomas is there basically walking him through the procedure. And he does that twice more. The film only covers that one baby. And she actually survives only for a couple more months. And then they do it, apparently, I looked up, they do an 11-year-old girl and then a 6-year-old boy. And both of them end up surviving. But this film really does document the issues with the relationship, how Thomas wasn't treated well, how Blalock didn't fight for him to get paid better, despite his struggles, despite a lot of the housing problems that he had living in Baltimore. Actually, after the blue baby procedure, there's a huge celebration. Thomas isn't recognized at all, even by Blalock. Blalock thanks everybody else, but the man standing over his shoulder to watch, talking him through this procedure. And Thomas leaves briefly, but he loved what he was doing, so he comes back, and he still has this kind of odd relationship with Blalock, who never actually does recognize him. Thomas stays, oddly enough, at Hopkins even after Blalock's death. He dies of cancer, I think, in 65. I'm going to double check that. 64, the age of 65. Thomas himself becomes basically the director of surgical research. He stays there for, I think, like 15 years and trains a lot of people, both African American and white, as surgical assistants. So in fact, his nephew trains as a doctor there, and is actually trained by some of the people who his uncle had previously trained. Oddly enough, his uncle, at least according to this article, he went into orthopedics and now works for the Tampa Bay Rays in Florida. But this film does a very good job of showing that a lot of the racism that Thomas faced, working bothly at Vanderbilt, more specifically at Johns Hopkins, how he wasn't acknowledged. And even the man that he was working with chose not to really acknowledge and support him, treat him as an equal, and see him as a colleague, more of someone, a lower assistant. So this film is done very, very well. Blalock is played brilliantly. Of course, he's played brilliantly by the late, the great, the absolutely wonderful, as I pull up the author, my author I'm talking about, because I cannot remember his name, but he played Snape in the Harry Potter films. So now you know who I'm talking about, Alan Rickman. There we go. Thomas is played by Mos Def, though I think he's going by a different name. Yes, I can't pronounce it. Yessing Bay of some sort. So he played, and then the woman who Helen Tusag is played by Mary Stuart Masterson. So these are the three kind of main characters. Mainly, obviously, it's Rickman and Def who were playing Thomas and Blalock. So it does a good overview of Thomas's life and his accomplishments. And it does end kind of on a happier note, which is in fact true, that a lot of the doctors and the laboratory assistants who had been trained by Thomas over the years commissioned a portrait of him to be hung at Johns Hopkins, which does exist. If you go to his Wikipedia page, you see that portrait of Thomas that they show in the film that's hung up at Johns Hopkins. So he develops he was an amazing, groundbreaking surgical assistant and someone who worked in the field of medicine despite all the challenges that he faced because of his race. So he was an amazing man, and Mos Def plays him very, very well. And of course, Alan Rickman does a great job of this controversial character that was Alfred Blalock. So it's a great film. Middle school would probably be the youngest. Be careful with your sensitive kids because they do show them experimenting on stray dogs. And there is one where you see Thomas sitting on the floor with a dog in his arms that had died, and this puppy that had died in his arms. That's how they kind of figure out that they need to do that children grow, and you have to do a different stitching technique. So it's hard to see. This is definitely not something a younger kid would have any interest in. So middle school would probably be the youngest. Do not show this to your more sensitive children, particularly massive dog lovers. It's hard to watch when it comes to that because they are experimenting on these dogs, and it does show that. It doesn't show outright cruelty, but again, they're inducing a heart defect in dogs that are perfectly fine. So that's hard even for me to watch as an adult and an animal lover. But overall, this is a great film to introduce this topic, to look at medical surgery, to look at African Americans in the medical field, because he was one of the earliest, particularly working in surgery. So Thomas was born in 1910. He died in 1985. So he worked at Johns Hopkins for a very, very long time. So apparently they also have a documentary that I didn't know of called Partners of the Heart, which probably talks about both of them. And then, of course, this film, Something the Lord Made. It's very well done, as I said. It does cover a very complex topic, and it's a good introduction. I would highly recommend it. I will link the description. I will link it in the description. You can actually find it. I saw it on HBO and found it interesting. If you were studying African American history, which is kind of why I'm doing this month, it's February, and this is a good film to watch because it does a decent way of explaining the race issues faced by this young expiring doctor who ends up becoming a lab assistant in extremely racist times. Because again, Blalock dies in 1964, and he's been working with Thomas since the 1940s. So it was a hard time, and you see a lot of the struggles that Thomas goes through with his family. So I believe he was married. I think he had 2 daughters. I'm going to scroll through his background. He ended up because obviously he has children, but yes, let's see, Vanderbilt, blue baby syndrome. Let's see, yes, personal life. Yes, he was born in, let's see, yes, his wife was Clara Beatrice Flanders. That was his wife. I can't remember. She's played by a famous actress. Here, let me see who plays his wife. Gabrielle Union plays his wife very, very well in this film. And Kira Sedgwick actually plays Blalock's wife in the film. And she does a very good job for basically being the wife of a massive workaholic. And you see a little bit of their relationship, how she just kind of goes out and does stuff on her own because she knows what she married. So, and then Clara Thomas's wife also pretty much figures out, it's like, yeah, I married a guy who's going into medical. You don't see him that much. So let's see, I believe he has, yeah, they have 2 daughters. Olga Faye was born in 1934, and Theodosia Patricia, who was born 4 years later in 1938. So, and there's not much more information on them. I think some of them went into medical school. But again, it's a great film. It's a good introduction. It's not for the squeamish. I wouldn't show it to any kid who's younger than middle school. They won't find it interesting, and it's powerful, and it doesn't shy away from things, particularly the dog experiments and a lot of the race issues and the poverty problems that Thomas's face, as well as his own depression issues after he leaves Blalock, after he's essentially not acknowledged for the work that he does. So it's a very interesting thing. You touch a little bit on the issues that Tusag faces because she's female, and again in the medical field. So yeah, it's an issue. But again, it ends on a high note, which is again true, where his students commission to have a painting done of him, and it is hung next to Blalock in Johns Hopkins all those years later, because I think this is done, he dies in 1985. Yeah, he was appointed to the faculty as an instructor of surgery in 1976, and then he retired in 1979, and then after his retirement, he worked on his autobiography. He died of pancreatic cancer in 1985. And apparently his book was published a few days later, so there is more information on his life. There's a huge bit of information on his legacy, and he's very well known in the medical field. So that's really it for this review. Again, a great film. Great acting, obviously. Mos Def was very, very good. Alan Rickman, of course, is very, very good, because that's what he was known for. He's probably one of the best actors that has been around. Unfortunately, we sadly lost him several years ago. So, and you don't really recognize him. When I saw this film, I didn't recognize the actor, because he gets very well into this very racist, very conflicted, very workaholic doctor. So, and this is the first time I think I saw Mos Def, and this is a very dramatic role, and he does it very, very well. And both Kira Sedgwick and Gabrielle Union play their wives in probably an extremely accurate way. So I enjoy this film. Definitely do not show it to squeamish children, no matter how old, because again, you see those dogs, and that's hard on me as an adult to watch. So middle school would be the youngest. The younger kids aren't going to get anything out of this. It's great to show if you were looking at African American history, because Thomas was an amazing contribution to medical science. As an African American, you see his struggles in this film. If you're looking at medical advancements, this is a great film to watch. But again, not for the squeamish. You also see them operate on a baby, and you see children. And why the film doesn't show this, that baby does end up dying, which is hard as a mother for me to watch. They do rescue 2 other children, and then it's still performed. It's still a procedure that is in fact performed on children who has this type of heart defect. So that's it. If you like this review, check out the rest of my stuff. I have a bunch of African American stuff, Asian American stuff going on this month, both films and books. I did a bunch of food stuff back in January. I have some more stuff, fun stuff planned for next month. Covered all of Harry Potter. If you're interested in more Alan Rickman, I covered both the books and the films from September to October. Did a bunch of fun Halloween stuff in October, and have a whole bunch more book reviews, family film reviews, some sprinkling of homeschooling videos, and some kind of kids travel videos here and there. So like and subscribe if you like what you see. Thank you.